Good morning. Can you read that? And put it a little higher. Can you read that? I found this yesterday, and it's from my friend Joe Culver. And he writes, Dave, your work is worth more, but this is what I can let go of. Joe had made a donation to my efforts. I appreciate your work. I appreciate you. Signed, Joe. Joe has been my friend for 50 years or so. Joe has taught me a lot. More than anything else, Joe gave me confidence to do what I do. Now that's no small thing, because deep down in all of us, we have this thing that we're not good enough. We can't be as creative as we would like to be, that nobody really appreciates you as an individual. I know that just about everyone goes through this, unless, of course, they create this false persona that they try to live up to. In other words, they suppress the real person. They create a persona that they try to live up to. Interesting, isn't it? Of course, that's a theory. So I woke up this morning, and to stroke my ego, I typed in the word Microdac in the Chrome search engine. And up comes the electronic company. When you type Microdac, the electronic company comes up. And of course, I have had Microdac since 1982. But this guy, whoever the owner is, I think he knows that I'm just a very small fish in a big pond. So he can use the liberty of using Microdac if he wants to. I cannot go up against his attorneys. I cannot go up against his money. I don't have any money. So he's pretty safe. The little guy can do nothing. The big guy will always win. That's the way it is, isn't it? That's a shame, really. But, and this is important, I went to the Bing search engine. Now, you know Bing is owned by Microsoft. So I go to the Bing search engine, and I mentioned this before, but just in case you're new to the Microdacism, I typed in, is Microdacism a religion? And wow, I was blown away by the amount of information the artificial intelligence of Bing came back with. You know what that told me, by the way? That the big guy, who is now using the word Microdac, yeah, he'll be around and he'll be successful. He'll make billions of dollars. And me, the original Microdac, will still be around, I have a feeling. Long after I'm gone, I'm still going to be here, because people are going to search Bing, the Microsoft search engine, and they're going to type in Microdacism, and there I am. But what I really am impressed with is this note from Joe Culver. I appreciate your work. I appreciate you. Now, I got to tell you, those words are very, very powerful, because it's almost impossible, I think, for an individual to appreciate themselves. That is because, and I'm going to try to word this properly, but I might fail, so bear with me. I don't know who I am by knowing me. I only know that I am as reflected as something out here looking back at me. Does that make sense? In other words, I can only appreciate me when I am out here looking at me as an observer. Okay, so it doesn't make sense. I've never been very good at words. That is one of the reasons why I just love Joe Culver to death. Because he told me to write anyway. He knows that I can't write, but he says write anyway. And I'm going to switch to another subject right now, because it's sort of relevant to what I'm talking about. In 1966, Gene Roddenberry had an idea called Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry was also a man with a conscience. 1966 was a time when many Americans were coming into their own self-awareness. Now, this is very important. Prior to 1960s, most Americans, almost all Americans, were machines. They simply react to what their government told them. So therefore, there were no people with self-awareness. And the reason for that is because, and it's very important that I explain this to you, and don't believe that I'm really knocking religion, but religion was such a controlling factor that even President Eisenhower changed the mantra, the heart of America, to satisfy religion. This is what I'm talking about. Once upon a time, America had a motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one people. Then in 1956, the civil rights movement began here in America. People of color, specifically black Americans, kept saying, look, we are Americans too, are we not? Religion, on the other hand, influenced Eisenhower, and Eisenhower changed the mantra, the heart of America, from E pluribus unum to in God we trust. Why? Because religious people convinced Eisenhower that slavery was okay. Black people were in fact inferior because it says so in the Bible. And amidst of that, you had people who came up, some really brilliant minds, but they were suppressed. I'm going to mention some of them, and I'm going to ask you, how many of these people do you recognize? Rod Serling, Rod McEwen, Gene Roddenberry, of course, Alan Watts, Ray Bradbury, Joseph Campbell. How many of those did you recognize? And there's my point. In spite of the country being divided, united we stand, and in God we trust. United we stand. We wanted to have one country that included all Americans. In God we trust. Wanted the white Americans because God says so. In spite of all that, these people came up. And one of the people that really influenced me was Rod Serling. Rod Serling wrote an awful lot of stories that nobody actually saw. But Rod Serling was doing his utmost best to address the civil rights issues in America. But he could not do that de facto. He could not of a fact do that. So he wrote these short stories to illustrate the inequities of America. Along with Rod Serling, we also had Gene Roddenberry. Now, Gene Roddenberry came up with Star Trek. None of the major studios wanted to touch Star Trek because, once again, Gene Roddenberry wanted to touch the civil rights issues of America. He wanted to bring the civil rights issues to the front of Americans' mind so that they could make corrections. the major studios turned him down. All except one very brave lady by the name of Lucy Arnaz. That's right. She had a show called I Love Lucy. And Lucy Arnaz was married to a Cuban. Wow. Can you imagine that back in the 60s, late 50s, 60s? But Lucy Arnaz started her own company called Desilu. And that's where they put Star Trek. She took a chance in Star Trek. Okay? Now, and there you had Star Trek, started by a woman who owned a studio called Desilu. That's very important because she was up against giants. Okay? All right, fast forward to the movie Star Trek, the motion picture. Star Trek, the motion picture. I think that movie cost something like $40 million to make. And the critics did not like it one bit. They thought it had too many razzle-dazzles, for one thing, and the storyline was confusing, but not to me. At that time, when this thing was made, and the movie was made, I would say around 1980, 1979, at that time I was coming into my own and I was asking questions. I was no longer accepting other people's answers. I was beginning to think for myself. The birth of Microdac. As a matter of fact, the movie came out in 1979. In 1982, I went down to the City Hall in Virginia Beach and I registered Microdac. Now, if you're still with me, let me explain something. Let me explain what I got out of the movie, okay? Gene Roddenberry wrote a movie called Star Trek, the motion picture. And to me, it was one of the most spiritually enlightened movies I have ever seen to date. Okay, here's the plot, okay? And I don't think the movie did enough about it. The Earth is threatened by an entity. It is about to come to Earth to destroy Earth. This entity is called V'ger. And nobody knows what V'ger is. What does V'ger want? Why does it want to come to Earth? Now, our first impulse is that it's coming to Earth to destroy Earth. That's because that's the way we're programmed to believe. Anything that's alien must be destroyed. That's the American way of thinking. So if it's alien and it's coming to Earth, it's coming to destroy us. So, off goes Star Trek, the Enterprise, to go out there and destroy this alien. Fast forward, they get out there, and this V'ger is coming to Earth. And Captain Kirk, of course, doesn't know what it wants. Captain Kirk doesn't know how to stop it. However, on board, V'ger scans the ship and takes away somebody. V'ger then puts the somebody back on the ship. And this somebody is no longer a person. It is now artificial intelligence personified. Are you still with me? Okay. Here is what Gene Roddenberry is trying to get across. V'ger is trying to come to Earth for an answer. V'ger is in fact Voyager. We sent Voyager out to space with the mission of collecting all that is collectible and bring it back to Earth. We did that. We sent the Voyager out to space. Voyager, on its journey into space, created its own intelligence. It evolved. Still with me? So Voyager, the man-made object, evolved as an intelligence, and it gave itself a purpose. The purpose was to collect all that is collectible and bring it back to Earth. Interesting, isn't it? So now we know what Voyager is. Voyager is a Voyager that has been evolving. So, what does Voyager want? Voyager is coming back to Earth to meet with the Creator. Sounds familiar? Voyager's only purpose is to meet with the Creator. Why? Because the Creator, us, sent it into space to collect all that is collectible. It evolved in a way that we could not have imagined. So, what about Voyager? Well, like Captain Kirk asked Spock, what does it want? And Spock gives this very profound answer. It is like a baby who wants but doesn't know what it wants. So now, we, the Creator of Voyager, must give it a new mission, a new purpose. See? Well, anyway, a lot of people didn't like the movie. I loved the movie. And I'm here to tell you that the motion picture, Star Trek the motion picture, I think will be made again with the spiritual qualities enhanced. Oh my God, look at the time. I apologize. I did not mean for this to be so long. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm making a video that nobody's going to watch. But that's okay. It's on record. And I got my point across, which is this note from my friend Joe Culver. Joe, you left us, your physical body left us, and now you are out on a new mission. I appreciate your work. I appreciate you. And I would like to say, just in case you're still with me, I appreciate you. Without you, I don't identify me. You see? Because it's I and I. You refer to yourself as I refer to myself as I. So it's I and I. And the question is, who is the observer? Who is being observed? And my second question is, what is my purpose? What is my mission?